2,000 years before Sparta, 3,000 years before Rome, 4,000 years before the first modern Olympic Games. Ancient Egypt had professional athletes, dedicated training facilities, organized sports competitions, and a physical culture so advanced that modern researchers are still finding new evidence of how sophisticated it was. And almost nobody talks about it. This is the story of the oldest known athletic culture in human history, and what it tells us about the relationship between physical development and civilization itself. Let's start with what we actually know. The oldest known depictions of organized sport date to ancient Egypt. Cave paintings at Beni Hasan, dating to approximately 2000 BC, show over 400 wrestling techniques in detailed sequential illustrations. Not just fighting. Not just brawling. Techniques. Setups. Takedowns. Escapes. Counter moves. This is a training manual carved in stone 4,000 years ago. Modern wrestlers still recognize the moves. But Egypt was not just wrestling. Archaeological and artistic evidence shows ancient Egyptians practicing what we would recognize as gymnastics, weightlifting, swimming, running, rowing, archery, stick fighting, and something that looks remarkably like modern boxing, with fighters wearing what appear to be padded hand coverings. They had ball games. They had tug-of-war. They had equestrian competitions. And they had something that no other ancient culture has left clear evidence of: organized, recurring athletic festivals with spectators, judges, and prizes. The pharaohs themselves were expected to be physically extraordinary. This was not symbolic. It was literal. A pharaoh who could not demonstrate physical prowess was considered unfit to rule. Ramesses II, arguably Egypt's most celebrated ruler, was documented as an elite archer and warrior who personally led charges in battle. His mummy shows the physical markers of a man who trained seriously throughout his adult life. Developed upper body. Arthritis consistent with decades of heavy physical activity. A spine shaped by a lifetime of work. Thutmose III, who ruled around 1450 BC, left inscriptions describing his athletic feats in detail. He claimed to have shot arrows through copper targets 3 inches thick from horseback at full gallop. Whether exactly accurate or ceremonially exaggerated, the point is this: in ancient Egypt, physical capacity was so important that pharaohs bragged about it the same way modern athletes post their personal records. But here is where it gets genuinely surprising. The ancient Egyptians appear to have understood something about physical training that we in the modern world only recently began to systematically study: that athletic performance is inseparable from spiritual and mental state. Egyptian priests doubled as physicians and athletic trainers. The concept of Ka, the life force or vital energy within a person, was understood to be both spiritual and physical. Training the body was training the Ka. A weak body had weak Ka. A strong, disciplined body had strong Ka. This is not just mysticism. Strip away the religious language, and what the Egyptians were describing is the connection between physical training, mental state, and what we now call the mind-body connection. They organized their training philosophy around this principle 4,000 years before neuroscience had the tools to explain why it was correct. Their nutrition was also surprisingly sophisticated by ancient standards. Egyptian workers and athletes consumed bread, beer, onions, garlic, legumes, fish, and occasional meat. This sounds simple. But consider, onions and garlic are among the most studied foods in modern sports nutrition research. They contain compounds, quercetin, allicin, that improve oxygen utilization at the cellular level and reduce exercise-induced inflammation. The workers who built the pyramids ate enormous quantities of onions and garlic. The ancient Egyptians may have figured out pre-workout nutrition empirically, for 1,000 years before sports science existed. The pyramid builders themselves are worth examining separately, because they are one of the most misunderstood physical populations in history. We now know from archaeological evidence, worker villages, skeletal remains, medical records inscribed on papyrus, that the pyramid builders were not slaves. They were organized, paid, fed, housed, and medically treated. They were professional laborists. Their remains show evidence of healed fractures, injuries that were treated rather than simply left to kill the worker. There were physicians on site. There were written medical protocols for treating work injuries, some of which aligned surprisingly well with modern sports medicine principles. These men were moving and lifting weights that would challenge modern construction equipment. The physical capacity required to be a pyramid builder was extraordinary, and the Egyptians built institutions to support and develop that capacity. Knumnakt and Naktank, two ancient Egyptian men whose skeletons were analyzed in a famous study, showed bone density and muscle attachment markers consistent with individuals who had performed heavy, repetitive physical labor from childhood throughout their lives. Their skeletons are stronger than almost any modern human skeleton ever documented. Now consider what produced that. Not a gym, not a training program, not a supplement. A lifetime of meaningful physical work, done in community, with adequate food, rest, and basic medical care. Here is the pattern that keeps emerging across every ancient civilization we examine on this channel. Milo of Croton, the Scottish Highland farmers, Louis Cyr, the Spartan egoge, the Norse rowing culture, and now ancient Egypt. None of them trained the way we train. None of them had periodization, progressive overload programs, protein shakes, recovery science, or any of the tools we consider essential. What they all had was this: physical work integrated into daily life, starting from childhood, continuing without stopping, in environments that demanded real effort. The disconnect between ancient physical capacity and modern physical capacity is not a mystery of genetics or lost knowledge. It is a straightforward consequence of what our lives demand of our bodies. Ancient Egyptians did not go to the gym. They were the gym. Their work was the workout. Their daily existence was the training program. We have built the most comfortable civilization in human history. And in doing so, we have systematically removed every natural stimulus for physical development from the daily lives of most human beings. The ancient Egyptians could not have imagined a society where people voluntarily sit in chairs for 8 hours and then pay money to lift